Jesus' touch. Today we're going to talk about Jesus' touch through a mother's love and Jesus' touch on children. You know, most of us didn't realize it at the time, but I want you to just take a moment and think back. Remember those carefree days of your youth? No bills. Anyone else remember that? Limited responsibility. You thought making your bed was a big deal. Limited responsibility. You had lots of time to be able to do. You might get by with not mowing the yard occasionally. Wow, those were wonderful years. If I miss mowing the yard every fifth day, it seems to me like we might as well bale it. That's my roots speaking, baling it. But anyway, you kind of get the idea. Those were wonderful days, but you know what happened? They soon passed. We all wanted to grow up. We couldn't wait to get started. We were anxious to do it. But now it was during those days that we would sit back and we would daydream about what we would do when we'd grow up. Most of us have done that. Just kind of kick back and daydream about what we're going to do. Once in a while, I'll prop my feet up on my desk and just lean back and daydream about what I'm going to do when I grow up. Or perhaps where life would take us. It's taken a lot of us in different directions that people didn't think it would. It was during those times, though, that the gentle touch of a mom could help us get in the right direction. That's when moms could gently steer us to help us understand that there wasn't anything impossible in our life. Because many times we've looked at life and think, oh, that's beyond me, or I can't do that, or I can never accomplish that. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've heard people say, oh, I couldn't pray in public, or I couldn't do this, or I couldn't do that, and then to watch them develop. And then to find out that it was probably mom who made you stand up and sing when you was 8 years old. Good job. You know, they convinced us that we could do that. Or it was mom who said, you're going to read that part in the school play whether you like it or not. Anyone else ever hear those things? My first school play, I think I was 8 years old and I got to be John Glenn's wife. Now, it was a Cub Scout play. Of course, there was no girls in Cub Scout. And since I stood head and shoulders taller than everybody else in Cub Scouts, I got her role. Does that make sense to anyone? I quit Cub Scouts after that, by the way. But I went home and told my mom, I said, I get to be John Glenn's wife. She goes, we'll make it work. I said, no, I'm quitting. She said, we'll make it work. So we made it work, and then I quit. It's moms that convince us that everything is possible and that nothing that we set out to do. I stole the show, by the way. They all provided through a gentle touch. Now, I've often thought that that gentle touch, and moms take note of this, I think that's from Jesus. And I think it's because you let Jesus do it. Because we live in a world that has soon taught us that all moms don't have gentle touches. I don't mean any disrespect to any moms throughout the world, but we soon learn that all moms don't have gentle touches. But those moms that have had that gentle touch have made such a difference in their children's lives and have made things really count for what's going on. In fact, many times we will live throughout our entire life without seeing the full extent of what God's purpose was for us, or understanding it, because no one really helped us dream that seems so impossible. So for all of you good moms, thanks for doing that. I thought about two moms that just really jumped out at me. One was named Nancy and one was named Sarah. Does anyone know where I'm going with this? One was named Nancy and one was named Sarah. And they both had very vital part in a tall kid named Abraham Lincoln. One, his mom would die by the time he was 9, but she had set a course in his life, made him feel important. You need to read about that. Made him feel very important and set a course for his life. And then Sarah Johnston would come into his life at age 11. And whenever she came into his life, she brought some things that were vital to our 16th president. She brought books, more than he had ever seen. She brought a Bible, and she brought lots of encouragement for a young Abe. Little did either one of them know. Now, Abraham Lincoln would grow up to call Sarah mother. mother. And that's how he would refer to her throughout his presidency. Little did either one of them know, though, the significant impact that their love had on this man. Now, I want all of you to take just a moment, because this man set the course of our country. It was a time in history whenever this nation could have easily been destroyed. But because of the love of two moms, they made a difference in this tall, gangly guy who seemed so unpolished, who didn't seem like he hadn't won anything. He had run for every office in the book. Until he ran for president, he didn't win anything to speak of. But they set a course in his life where he didn't quit. Matthew chapter 7, I like this passage. Starting in verse 24, it'll say this. Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, and the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he had taught as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. I want each of you to take a moment now and think about if you had that good mom, how she's helped set that course in your life, how she helped you to dream, how she helped you to be able to see as never before. Those carefree days of youth, they quickly passed. But that foundation that was laid all those years ago is still so vital. So the question today, the main question for everyone here, for every parent, but especially for you moms. See, I think moms are the ones that lay the foundation. I look at my kids and I thank Deb for them. Not only is she the mom who has given me these kids, but I got to tell you, I stay busy, and sometimes I stayed too busy, and I was always on the go, and I was always running, and it was Deb who was gently guiding. I am the enabler. She is the corrector. I have enabled my kids to do more things than they should have ever done. I take full responsibility. Shut that camera off. I take full responsibility. I have been the enabler. The good things that they have done, I take full credit for. But that's all I'm doing, is taking credit for. Deb's the one who has been that guide. She has been that one who has helped set that foundation that they build upon. And most of you moms are in that way. So today, this is for all parents though. I want to talk to you about the touch of Jesus and what it should provide for us. The very first thing that I think the touch of Jesus should do is provide for direction. Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 6. It's a familiar passage. Train a child in the way they should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it. Train a child in the way they should go. Remember that age-old adage that says, do as I say, not as I do? That was my practice. I'd like to tell my kids, look, when you play ball, don't do it like Dad. You don't have to go out there. It's not war. Go and have fun. I thought I was going to war whenever I played ball. And Deb tried to teach them to have fun and enjoy it. That's the wrong way to teach kids, the way I did it. We have to teach them in the way that they should go. We have to help establish a direction. So I thought about how Jesus worked in their life and how Jesus was to set an example for all of us. And what do we see? Well, we see he established a direction. It was gentle, folks, but it was firm. It was firm. He gently guided us in the way we should go, but it was firm in what he wanted us to accomplish. He had that personal guidance. It wasn't one of those things of pointing the way and saying, not as I've said, go that way. Here's where we're going. He would gently guide them. He would gently lead them, not pointing a direction. And often that's what moms, good moms, do, is they gently guide us through that time. They provide that proper direction. Now I thought about how can we apply that today for parents. Now parents, please take note of this. And especially all of you who are still young parents and have children that are still in those formative years. Give your kids tools to make decisions with, to establish that direction with, that they have tools to deal with life, that they can find their way because of direction that you have given them in days past. Whenever they come to one of those crossroads, whenever there's that tough decision, remember the second part, and they will not turn from it. They will remember that direction that you have given them. Tools to establish their marriage. Tools to make marriage a success. Tools that will help them solve the problems that they deal with or the everyday stress. Tools that will help them find success and know how to deal with it. And tools that will help them to deal with the failures that will come their way. Tools that will help them have self-worth and help them deal with it when someone steals it from them. Those are such vital parts. And Jesus, parents, is the foundation that we need to build our home upon. And whenever we build our home upon it, not only do our children reap that benefit, but then we do. We do as well. And the benefit of that then becomes so valuable to us. It becomes that solid foundation because we are able to find proper direction. Most of us are not, especially you guys, are not ones to ask for directions. I hate to ask for directions. I just really hate to ask for directions. Now, I don't know why. Probably an ego thing. I should know how to get there. Now, some of you cheat and have those fancy phones that have GPS. My phone is not very fancy. It still flips up. Ron Morrison sent me a picture the other day. He said, "Your phone get pictures?" I said, "I have no idea, but I think it does." It was about this big. Don't ever send me a picture. I don't know what it was of, and it cost me $2. I don't want any pictures from any of you, okay? So that's $4. $4. Just want to put, Ron, four. So you kind of get the idea. But, folks, we need to develop that personal direction. And Jesus helps us to do that. So no matter where you're at in life, no matter what type of technology you're able to deal with, the one technology that you can deal with is the Word of God. And let it establish that direction for you. The second thing is it has to provide a proper attitude. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 20. Page 3 just almost escaped. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 20 says this. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God was making his appeal through us. We implore you in Christ's behalf to be reconciled with him. You are Christ's ambassador. So, parents, moms, whenever you are gently guiding those kids, or whenever it's not quite so gentle, sometimes it's not a gentle hand, I realize that. Whenever it's not taking place, remember that you are Christ's ambassador. That you are the one that is going to represent him. That you must realize that you're not just the creator of children. That you're not just the provider of home and food and clothing. That you're not just the director of their education and their activities. Every one of those is important, but build upon that solid foundation. Each of us in our home need to build upon that solid foundation because each of us will have to realize that we are provider of home, food, and clothing, that we will direct in education, that we'll take part in activities. But to establish ourselves on a firm foundation as Christ's ambassadors, representing him, that you represent him. Children need good examples. So now I want each of you to take just a moment and think about the example that we as parents, mom and dad both, listen up. Aunt and uncle, grandpa and grandma, listen up. What about prayer? I've always wondered, how can a child learn to pray if they don't see mom and dad pray? How can a child really understand the importance of speaking to Him if they never see you do it? How can they understand the importance of tithing if they don't know what's important to you? How can they understand the importance of coming in here and worshiping and focusing on worship if they've never seen you do that? How can they appreciate all the blessings that God has given them if we as parents just take them for granted? As I think back over my life and the years that Deb and I have been married, the appreciation of all the blessings. Folks, we've not been wealthy, but we've been blessed beyond degree. The blessings just keep flowing from God. And if we don't sit back and appreciate them, each of you take just a moment. If you got a roof over your head, that's a blessing. That's a blessing. I've met people that don't have. You know, if you've got a pretty good warm meal, that's a blessing. That's a blessing. If you were able to eat today, you were blessed more than half the world. Each of you take a moment and think about, how much does my children see me appreciate this? I have been blessed throughout my life. I have been able to see how, as I look back, I see it much clearer. Of course, looking back's great. But I've been able to look back and see, even as a youth, whenever things weren't always what they should have been in our home, I can look back and just see how God was constantly giving me a little nudge this direction or that direction. Sometimes I listened and sometimes I didn't. And we've all been there. Some of you have said, well, I've always listened to God. Yeah, right. We realize that we don't always listen. But not only mom and dad, grandpa and grandma, aunt and uncle are ambassadors, but there are other people that come into your life and they represent Christ. And they show you Him in no other way. So I want you to think about it this Mother's Day. I don't care what the age of your children are. I don't care if you're 99 and your children are 79. It really don't matter to me. I had a 95-year-old yesterday funeral, and her children were at least my age or older, and she was still mom, even at 95. So I don't care what your age is. I want you to help them see how God has walked with you each step of your life. In each segment. Maybe you're talking to your nieces and nephews or whoever it might be. Maybe it's just another adult that you're going to run into, and as a Christian you want to be an ambassador for Christ. I see God working in my life at 65 in ways so much different than He did at 25. Somebody and I were talking about that earlier. You know, at 25, I was a pretty aggressive young man. You want to fight, we'd fight. If you'd want to argue, we'd argue. You want to wrestle, we'd wrestle. You want to play ball, we'd play ball. It didn't matter. But now as I've gotten older, if you want to fuss, I will refer you to someone. All right? If you want to argue, I've got recommendations. Here, talk to this person. I don't have too much time for that anymore. I want you to know 65 is a whole lot better than 25. At 25, I did it. I really wasn't good at it. But it's a whole lot easier to say, why don't you talk to this person? Now, if you are getting some people that come to you and say, I don't like this, I want you to know I've sent them to you. All right? So that way you don't have to worry, how did they come to me? But if someone is coming and telling you that, it's probably because I told them you like to fuss too. All right, so now you get the idea. So the two of you can just have at it. We change in life. Isn't that great? Now, some of my changes I haven't been real partial to, by the way. But some of them have just been such blessings. As God has allowed me to see each segment of the way, to be able to see how He could work in my life. I believe that was established through Grandma. I think my grandma established that with me as I saw her life change each step of the way. So we helped them to realize that Jesus is in every aspect of life. Now get this, please hear this. Folks, Christianity is an attitude. It's an attitude. It's one that you have to develop within. Because the world has taught us a different attitude, that aggressive, argumentative, fussing. Where Jesus has taught me another attitude. Go throughout your New Testament and see how many times you see Jesus arguing with someone. Not a whole lot. Christianity is an attitude. So an ambassador of Christ you must be to teach that to those that are in your life. The third thing that we have to see, the touch of Jesus, He provides a proper hope for us. A proper hope for us. This has rapidly become one of my favorite scriptures in 1 Corinthians 15, starting in verse 50. Because our life, it's going to develop in all sorts of ways. There's going to be direction, there's going to be attitude. But the one thing that we have to be able to pass on from generation to generation is hope. Now, when's the greatest hope that we have? Well, we can have hope in everyday life. But I tell you when you want it the most is when you lose people in your life. Whether it's a son or a daughter, I see some here who have done that. Whether it's a mom or a dad or a grandpa or grandma. I declare to you, brothers, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Listen, I tell you a mystery, we'll not all sleep, but we'll all be changed in the flash, in the twinkling of an eye at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. Now think about that. The perishable, this. The mortal is this. The mortal with immortality, so that the saying that is written will come true. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. Get this. But thanks be to God. He gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. The one thing that we want to be able to do as parents, grandparents, as those that help provide for direction and those that help provide for attitude, is we want to leave an inheritance of hope. Of hope. I'm amazed at how many Christians, whenever the day comes, and it has for many, and I will stand there and I know that this has been a good Christian person. And their son or their daughter or their grandson or their granddaughter or their brother or their sister will come to me and say, do you think dad or mom or sister or brother, however, do you think they're okay with the Lord? Do you think they're okay? That's when we lack hope. That's when our assurance isn't what it should be. So one of the things that I want you to instill in your ambassadorship, one of those things that I want you to instill in that teaching of direction that you're going to give, is the hope. Our greatest fear as Christians is people being lost. People being lost. I don't want to think about someone being lost. But every day we deal with it. Every day we worry about family members, we worry about friends. Now what's wrong with us taking another step and assuring those that we love and those that love us that everything's good with me and the Lord? Everything's good with us. I would never want anyone to doubt that everything's good with me and the Lord. Now, do I do everything that He has wanted me to do? I try. Do I stumble? I have. But we're still good. It's called grace and forgiveness and love. And that's what God does for us, folks. So on this Mother's Day, every one of us have got treasures that we've stored up in heaven where no one can take them away from us. We've all got them. Oh, I think about the treasures of my days past. I loved my life even outside of the Lord. I enjoyed my childhood. I can take you down the little old country road that I lived on over and again. And I've done that, but you get it one more time. Right down the road from us was Mr. Laughlin. Mr. Laughlin was 80 years old the day that we moved into our house. Mr. Laughlin would sit on his porch and strum that old banjo. As a kid, I was so fascinated with Mr. Laughlin. Mr. Laughlin was one of the first that I can remember outside of Grandma Pickle taking me to church. For years, I had a spear from New Guinea from one of the cannibal tribes that his grandson, who had been a missionary, had brought back, and it hung in my mother's house, and I hung it there with great appreciation for years and years. The house burned, I lost the spear, but it was important to me. Oh, it was so nice. Now, right across in the countryway there from Mr. Laughlin was Flora Moore and Myrtle Gray, Flora and Myrt. Flora was an old maid, and Myrt was her sister, and she was tough. And I would go mow their yard, and they had a porch swing. We didn't have a porch swing, so I kind of liked that. And I'd go mow their yard. My pay was a glass of tea and cookies, all right? But they needed me. But now the problem was I had to sit smack dab in the middle between the two. And I would be wet by the time I'd leave. They just made all over me. They loved Mike. And I loved them. And it was Flora and Myrt that took me down the road to the old Methodist church just down the way. Mr. Laughlin took me to a Baptist church. Flora and Myrt would take me down to that Methodist church once in a while, especially when they were going to have treats. I got to go on treat day. Now, I wasn't in church as much as it sounds, but Mr. Laughlin took me to that revival with his grandson and Flora Myrt. Boy, they'd take me to Vacation Bible School. Now, I had that mastered. I could show up in time for the snacks. I enjoyed that. The rest of it was okay. But anyway, right down the street on the other side of us, on the west side, on the east side, was Mrs. Bradham. Now, Mrs. Bradham was a kind old lady. She was just short of 100 when I knew her, and she still lived by herself, so I would go and get her coal and whatever else she was burning, and I would carry it in at night. Now, Mrs. Bradham, I was driving my old pickup truck by the time I was 13, and her husband was buried out at Bunker Hill, which was about 5 miles out. That's an old Baptist church in our area, and she'd say, "Could you take me out to Bunker Hill? I need to take flowers." That poor old woman, I'm surprised she lived to be as old as she did riding with me. But off we'd go in that old Ford pickup truck. There wasn't anything slow about it. It just run as hard as I could run it. I didn't realize the aches and pains that she had at that age. That's just a little story of my childhood. But I want to assure you, their labor was not in vain. And neither will yours be if you touch the life of people around you. Their life was not in vain, because I'm sure the day will come that there will be a reunion, and every one of them will say, "Oh, Mike, good to see you." Folks, that's important. Now, I'm telling you all of that because you have those little Mikes in your life, and you don't realize it at times. Or you have those little Donnas in your life, and you don't realize it at the time. It may be the kid next door that things aren't quite as good as they are in other places. And there they are, those people next door that just make all over you. See, the gentle touch of Jesus comes through the loving hands of those around us. And it starts, Mom, with you. The two, the gentle touch and the loving hands, are for family and for friends. And I'd like to tell you that it's something that you're doing, but it's something that Jesus is doing through you, if you will let Him. So I encourage you, let Jesus touch your life, because through you, He will touch a lot of lives. I loved Flora Moore. She was such a grand old woman whenever I knew her. She'd come to our little old burg in a covered wagon. And that was pretty neat to an 8-year-old kid. I've got a plate of Jesus, and that's what Flora Moore left me. Now, I don't even like pictures of Jesus, but that plate's pretty important because she touched my life. Mr. Laughlin, Mrs. Bradham, Myrtle Gray, and I could go on and on. And that's where you are, folks. You are touching the lives of others. Make it count. Will you all please stand as we have our invitation?